Some frogs are princes, and some frogs are princesses, but their stories go very differently depending which they are. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and I tell all sorts of fairy tales on my channel, and if you're old here, well, same. I had my wedding makeup and hair trial today, so I'm all glammed up, and I have to make a content before I take my face off. I wrote this mashup of Grimm's Frog Prince and Russia's The Frog Tsarina for a live show and didn't end up performing it there, so let's do it today.
Fucked up fairy tales with Liz.
Ding! Once upon a time in Germany, when wishing still did some good, isn't that a prescient opener, Grimm? There lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself marveled every time it shone upon her face. Imagine being so sexy the fucking sun creeped on you all day long. Being beautiful is a nightmare. This gorgeous princess spent her days in the forest by the old well under a linden tree. I expect she liked it there because not even the sun could ogle her. Usually she brought along her favorite trinket, a little golden ball, and she played catch with herself in the shade. I don't know if that's a metaphor. I also don't know how old she's supposed to be. Is this a little girl? The fact that she's playing with a ball is good evidence of that. Or are we just infantilizing this grown woman? Maybe it's neither. Maybe she's just a gold digger, no matter which. I'm bummed out. Now, our Russian story centers on a royal family with 3 sons, and once again, it is the youngest sibling who gets our attention, because Eurocentric fairy tales are obsessed with the youngest sibling. Are any of you youngest siblings out there? Congratulations. Are any of you eldest siblings? Because I sympathize. Are any of you middle children? Nobody cares, middle children. And how about my only children? Stop making it all about you. The king's sons were of marrying age, and rather than deal with matchmaking or midnight balls, the king gave each of his sons a bow and arrow and said, "Shoot this arrow in whatever direction you see fit. Whoever brings back your arrow will be your bride. And if no one returns your arrow, you will remain an unmarried loser." The boys shot their arrows in the sky, and the eldest's arrow returned in the hand of a princess, and the middle son's arrow returned in the hands of a general's daughter, and the youngest, Prince Ivan, well, his arrow was returned in the teeth of a frog. But how did our German princess meet her frog? Well, one day she accidentally fumbled her beloved golden ball into a dark well, and just to keep things from getting too confusing, I'm gonna give this poor kid a name, though I will name her in the great fairy tale tradition after her favorite outfit or object. Yes, we'll call her Little Golden Ball. It's not a great name, but it'll have to do. Little Golden Ball peered over the side of the well, but it was far too deep for her to reach the bottom, and bereft of her favorite object, her very namesake, the princess crumbled into sobs. She was completely beside herself, just wailing in the middle of the forest for no one to hear. Well, not quite no one. A voice cut through her blubbering. "What on earth's got you in a fuss, princess? Lord, your cries could make stone-cold iron run with tears." Little Golden Ball had been interrupted by a frog, whose ugly face peeped at her from the murky well water. "Ugh!" she yelled. "It's you!" Apparently they'd met before. She detested this frog, but she did want a shoulder to cry on, or at least a webbed foot. "I'm crying because I lost my favorite golden ball in the grody well," she said. And the frog laughed. "Calm down. I'll get it back. Here's the thing, though. I'm not doing it for free." Now, back in Russia, Prince Ivan appealed to the king, begging him to call off the marriage to the frog, but the king would hear none of it. "Rules are rules, son. Maybe you should have shot your arrow in the opposite direction of the swamp." So the older brothers were married to their beautiful brides, and Prince Ivan married the frog, who he held on a dish during the ceremony. I think that's adorable, but he was the laughingstock of the kingdom. Now, he wouldn't be for long. Shortly after Ivan and the frog shacked up together as man and pet wife, the king asked his new daughter-in-laws to sew him a shirt. Ivan went to bed that night with the little frog beside him on a cushion, and he buried his head in his hands. "How does he expect you to sew a shirt?" he bawled. "You don't even have thumbs!" And his frog wife merely croaked in response, and Ivan wailed, "I hate my life!" and he cried himself to sleep. Imagine his surprise when the next morning a beautiful, supple linen shirt shot through with delicate golden threads was folded neatly next to the frog. Ivan was thrilled. He kissed the frog and wiped his lips clean and brought the shirt to his father. Not only did the king love the shirt, he declared that his eldest son's wives brought him garbage. What a dick. Now, in Germany's beautiful Black Forest, little Princess Goldenballs, or whatever the hell I named her, assured her frog frenemy that she could offer him whatever he would like in exchange for retrieving her favorite toy. I am rich as hell, she said. What do you want? Pearls, gems, my tiara, some clothes? And the frog scoffed, what the fuck would I do with any of that? What I want is to be your friend, your best friend, your boyfriend. I want to cozy up by your side and feed each other sweets and drink from your cup, if you know what I mean. Promise me that, and I'll bring back your beloved ball. Oh, I see. The princess swallowed back her revulsion. Sure. I need you to promise, the frog said. I promise, the princess assured him, but she was crossing her fingers. The frog dove deep into the well, and momentarily the golden ball popped out of its depths and into the princess's outstretched hands, and the frog hadn't even resurfaced before the princess had bound out of the woods back home, washing her hands of the despised creature. Okay, so neither of these people are very likable. We've got a spoiled, lying brat of a princess and a lascivious frog who kind of blackmails ladies into being his girlfriend. Maybe they deserve each other. But it's hard to imagine a happily ever after for these two. Things were going much better for Ivan and his frog wife, as somehow the frog provided another glorious gift requested by her father-in-law, the most beautiful loaf of bread, and hers was carved with little beasts in its crusts, and it was worthy of a Paul Hollywood handshake. The king loved it, and he told his two older daughter-in-laws that they could take their own loaves and choke on them. But the king's third request was the toughest of all. He invited the three wives to a dinner, followed by a ball, so he could judge their dancing skills. Ivan went to bed that night in tears once again, but his frog wife spoke up, with words, rather than ribbits. Go to the ball with no qualms, she said in a sweet voice. I'll be an hour late, but other than that, I won't embarrass you. And she'd been good on her croak the first 2 times, so Ivan slept soundly and showed up to the ball the next day with curious confidence. An hour into the event, just as dinner was served, Ivan's frog wife arrived, but she wasn't a frog at all. She was the most stunning princess the kingdom had ever seen, all gussied up in green damask and malachite jewelry. Who are you? Ivan asked, as she took his arm. I'm your wife Elena, she said, in the same sweet voice she'd used the night before, and suddenly, Ivan felt really bad for not bothering to figure out his fucking wife's name earlier. The royal family sat down for their banquet. Now, our German royal family was also sitting down for a meal, though a more intimate one. Despite having met her froggy nemesis mere hours earlier, little Golden Ball completely forgot about him. So, the entire family was surprised when they heard a knock at the door. Are we expecting guests? The king asked, and his wife shrugged. So the king sent his daughter to answer. Royals behaving domestically like this pops up in a lot of fairy tales from the folk tradition. The characters are kings and queens and princesses, but they behave like you and me, answering their own doors, cooking their own meals, and sewing their own clothes. Some academics believe that this is because the stories originated with commoners who didn't know how royals lived, or because they were imagining themselves as the royals, elevating themselves to a higher status, but still going about the day, the way that they normally would, and I find that so charming. The princess opened the door and found the frog on the stoop. She screamed, and she slammed the door shut, and then she composed herself and returned to dinner. But the frog kept knocking, somehow, with his tiny little feet. The king asked the princess about the visitor. You seem nervous, dear. Was it a giant at the door? If the princess wondered why her father would send her to answer the door when there's a threat of giants on the other side of it, she didn't show it. It's just this frog I met yesterday who made me promise to be his boyfriend because I dropped my golden ball in the well and he got it back for me, but that's creepy, right? Like, I can't be boyfriend-girlfriend with a frog. Unfortunately, the king observed the bros before hoes rule. You made a promise to the guy, so you gotta deliver. Let the creature in. Little Golden Ball rolled her eyes, but she let the frog in. She stalked back to her chair and she sat down, and the frog pulled at her skirt. I want to sit next to you. The princess tried to ignore the frog, but her dad was weirdly insistent that she deliver on her promise. And when the frog asked to eat from her plate, the king said, let him eat. And when the frog wanted a sip from her cup, which it turns out he did mean literally, the king said, let the guy drink. And when the frog said, okay, I'm done, let's go to bed, wink wink, the king said, don't cock block that frog, girl. There is such a thing as being too involved as a parent. At the Russian banquet, Elena the Frog Princess had all eyes on her. Not only was she beautiful, she was very bizarre. Once she cleaned the bones of her goose dinner, she threw them down one sleeve, and she finished off her wine and poured the last drops in her other sleeve. And not to be outshone by Elena, the elder prince's wives did the same, though they had no idea why they were doing it. And when the dancing began, Elena revealed the reasons behind her stowaway leftovers. As she whirled and twirled prettily, she flung one arm out, and the drops of wine in her sleeve transformed into a crystal lake. And when she flung the other arm, the bones in her sleeve transformed into big, beautiful swans. Everyone cheered, and her sisters-in-law attempted the same, but of course, they just ended up spraying the crowd with backwash and bones. The elder brothers and their wives left in shame, while Ivan and Elena left in triumph. Ivan couldn't wait to get home and finally consummate his marriage with the beautifully human Elena. He peppered her with questions on the way. How did you come to be a frog? How did the curse end? Why have you only revealed yourself now? But Elena changed the subject each time. When they got home, they both raced to the bedroom. Are you as excited as I am? Ivan asked. Elaine shut him down. I need some private time in the bedchamber, please. They tussled at the door. But Ivan got in first. He locked it tight behind him, determined to find what she was hiding. And he found it in the form of a large frog skin lying over a chair. He picked it up gingerly and determined to never see his beautiful wife in frog form again. He threw the skin on the fire. Back in Germany, little Golden Ball sulked all the way to her own bedroom, the frog hopping as fast as he could to keep up with her. He slipped through the door before she could shut him out, but her tall bed proved too big an obstacle for him to leap. Hello, the frog said. Pick me up, or I'm going to tell your dad you won't honor your promise. This was too much for the princess. She had finally hit her limit. You need a hand, frog? She snapped, picking him up rather roughly. Rather than deposit him on the bed, however, she wound up and threw him against the wall with all of her might. He hit with a satisfying splat. Wildly, this did not kill him. Rather, when he slid down the wall, he landed in the princess's bed as a haughty human prince with a body, and I quote, friendly eyes. He told the princess all about the wicked witch who cursed him and how Lil Goldie was the one person who could break the curse. Things had really turned around for the princess. I have to assume the two fooled around a little before they fell asleep, for as the Grimms noted in the first volume of their fairy tales, the two fell asleep with pleasure. I'll give this one thing to the Frog Prince. This violent method of curse breaking completely justifies his pushy, borderline predatory behavior. If he needed a kiss to break the spell, he was being a real creep about it. But if he needed to annoy the princess so badly she became frogicidal, he did the exact right thing. If you're curious how we got from this version of the tale to the kiss breaking the spell, I'm afraid there's no concrete answer for you. English translations of the tale did opt for a less violent curse breaking. The frog spends 3 nights in bed with the princess, and the 3rd night he, transforms. Some theorize that perhaps the kiss was an adjustment made to eliminate the suggestiveness of the bedroom situation. The first recorded version of the tale with a magical kiss is from 1891, recorded in the former region of Pomerania, which is now split between Germany and Poland. Things are wrapping up for our German couple, but not going so swimmingly in the bedroom of our Russian pair. When Ivan let Elena inside, she ran to the chair. Where is my frog skin? What have you done? She cried. I was required by my enchantment to wear the frog skin just a little bit longer. If you had only allowed it, the curse would have been broken. But now I am doomed. Before Ivan could ask for an explanation, Elena vanished. Now you see how hard our frog wives must work to end their curse, and how easy it is for our frog husbands? Elena must prove herself 3 times over, outshining her non-cursed peers as the best seamstress, the best baker, and the best dancer. Also, she can wield magic? But after all that, she still has to hide out as a frog for some indeterminate amount of time to see her transformation complete. Our frog prince spends one afternoon being an annoying dickhead and earns his freedom. This is commonly the case in animal bride and groom tales. The beastly boys are terrifying monsters, rude hedgehogs, evasive bears, but our cat and our crane and our frog ladies are accomplished and whimsical and often have much more indirect and secretive reasons behind their curses. And their endings are not always happy ones. Back to Germany. The morning after his transformation, the prince proposed, and a good thing too since they were found in quite a compromising position. Little Goldie was thrilled with her beau's handsomeness and complete lack of slime, and she was further pleased when a gorgeous coach drawn by 8 horses wearing ostrich plumes on their head like a bunch of Ziegfeld girls pulled up to the palace to bring them back to the prince's kingdom. Now, this would be the natural end of our tale, with them riding off into the sunset, but the Grimm's version of this story has a very bizarre button, pivoting to an entirely new character we haven't heard of until now. The prince's most faithful servant, Henry. Pause on him. Meanwhile, in our Russian tale, we're about to meet 700 new characters, depending what version of the story you read. The second half is all about Ivan's pursuit of his lost bride. If you are at all familiar with the fairy tale East of the Sun, West of the Moon, or perhaps with the myth of Cupid and Psyche, it has a similar arc, which is quite satisfying in a way. You know, our Princess Elena had to show off over and over to earn her prince, and now Prince Ivan must show himself worthy of her. He, however, gets a lot more help along the way. First, he makes 4 new animal friends on his journey: a bear, a rabbit, a duck, and a fish, all of whom he meets with the intent of killing, but spares their lives when the animals promise that they will serve him down the road. Further in his journey, Ivan seeks shelter from one of Russia's most unpredictable folklore baddies, Baba Yaga. "Oh, I know what happened to your frog friend," the old witch said as she showed him into her hut perched atop a chicken feet. "She's under the spell of Koshchei the Deathless. Here's the thing about old Koshchei, though. He's not as deathless as he claims. You simply need to kill him with the magical needle that's inside the egg of a duck that's been swallowed by a rabbit, which lives in the middle of an oak tree that Koshchei watches over like a hawk." In other words, the most bizarre Russian nesting doll situation imaginable. Ivan made it to the tree, but wasn't really sure how to get inside of it without Koshchei the Deathless stopping him. And suddenly, from out of nowhere, the bear he'd met rushed the tree and ripped it out of the ground and broke it in half over one knee. And a rabbit jumped out, but before it could run away, the first rabbit we met in the story jumped that rabbit and beat the shit out of it, tearing it to pieces and freeing the whole duck inside. And that duck flew off, but it met Ivan's duck bestie mid-flight, who beat the bird until an egg popped out of its butt, which isn't how any of that works. Ivan reached for the egg, but it fell in the river. Of course, Ivan's fish friend retrieved the egg, and Ivan got his hands on the magical needle, and he poked Koshchei the Deathless with it, and made him Koshchei the Dead. Elena was saved, and our couple lived happily ever after, and I'm not confused at all. Believe it or not, the end of Grimm's Frog Prince is even more confounding. The faithful servant Henry helped the prince and little Goldie into the carriage, and they set off toward the prince's kingdom. Henry could barely contain his excitement at this turn of events. See, when his prince had been turned into a frog, he was devastated. He was so heartbroken, the palace doctors feared for his life. So using the latest fairy tale medical technology, the docs secured 3 iron bands around Henry's heart so it wouldn't explode from sadness. Clearly, Henry is in love with the prince, and I'm wondering if little Goldie's going to end up a beard in this situation. Now that the prince's humanity was restored, Henry didn't need those iron bands no more. On the way home, the couple in the coach heard 3 deafening metallic cracks, and the prince poked his head out of the window. "Is everything okay out there?" he cried. "I think the coach lost a wheel or something." "No worries, sire," Henry called. "'Twas merely the 3 iron bands that surrounded my heart springing off. So gleeful am I that you are no longer trapped in that hideous frog form." "Oh, okay," the prince said, echoing the reader's thoughts. "Sounds like we have a lot to catch up on." They did. But sadly, and randomly for us, this is where our tale ends. Why? Hell if I know. The end. Animal bridegroom fairy tales are my favorite way we have sifted through relationship and marital drama, which is why you can read half a dozen of them in my book, Fucked Up Fairy Tales. Besides romantic troubles, I also feature tales in which we work through family baggage and address our aging and disgusting bodies. I mean, I don't know about you, but me for sure. And just for fun, a whole lot more blood and guts. So you can get that book wherever you most like to get books, and I hope you do. Thanks for listening.